Welcome everyone. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, the cost of developing video games was fairly modest when compared to what it is today. As the capabilities of home consoles and high-end gaming rigs have increased through, development costs have risen sharply, with most modern titles now costing publishers and developers tens of millions of dollars to produce. Some, however, can cost considerably more. Here are the 7 most expensive games ever made and how much it cost to make them. Let's start the video. Number 7. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, $75 million. The latest chapter in the excellent Tomb Raider reboot series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, also happens to be Lara's most expensive outing to date. In an interview with Games Industry Biz, head of Eidos Montreal David Anfossi revealed that the game's production budget came in at somewhere between $75 and $100 million, with an additional $35 million or so being spent on marketing and promotion. Luckily for the developer, the game sold incredibly well, with more than 4 million copies being snapped up in its first 3 months on the market alone. It performed strongly with critics as well, although its ratings over on Metacritic aren't quite as impressive as those for the 2 games that preceded it. Regardless, it's more than likely that the title returned a healthy profit for both its developer and its publisher, Square Enix. Number 6. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, $80 million plus. It's looking increasingly probable that Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain will be Hideo Kojima's final Metal Gear game, with the influential Japanese developer having parted ways with Konami back in 2015. The exact reasons for the sudden and shocking split will likely remain a mystery, but the budget for his final project with the company is at least a little bit clearer. According to Eurogamer, a report from a Japanese financial newspaper revealed that $80 million had been spent on the game's production as of April 2015. With the final release not coming until September of the same year, however, it's fairly likely that the final cost was a lot closer to the $100 million mark, especially if post-release content and patches are taken into account. Number 5. Defiance, $81 million. Defiance was an MMO third-person shooter that released for the Xbox 360, PS3 and PC back in 2013. Although it didn't impress critics all that much, it did attract a fairly sizable player base and survived for a very respectable 8 years before servers were finally shut down in early 2021. The game's huge budget certainly helped in this regard, although its true cost remains a little unclear. Shortly before its release, a report from Forbes suggested that around $100 million had been spent on the entire project, although this amount also covered the cost of a Sky-Fi television series of the same name. The report estimates that around $80 million went towards the game itself, but this amount could be considerably higher given that an enhanced version of the title was later released for the PS4 and Xbox One. Number 4. Battlefield 4, $100 million. Considered by many to be one of the very best FPS franchises out there, it should perhaps come as little surprise to learn that EA's Battlefield games are not cheap to make. According to the company's former chief creative officer Richard Hillman, in fact, the series' 4th entry cost a staggering $100 million to develop, which would make Battlefield 4 the franchise's most expensive title to date. The game performed strongly with critics and has sold more than 7 million copies since its launch. Despite these impressive accomplishments, however, it struggled to keep up with the competition, with Call of Duty: Ghosts going on to sell almost 3 times as many copies. Whether the highly anticipated Battlefield 6 will fare any better in this regard remains to be seen. Number 3. Cyberpunk 2077, $174 million. After 8 years in development and multiple delays, developer CD Projekt Red had a lot riding on the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. It sold well enough, but the game's buggy performance and various glitches led to widespread criticism from players, causing the company's value to fall by billions of dollars in the weeks that followed. Compared to that, the $316 million that was spent making and marketing the game seems like little more than a drop in the ocean. According to one of the company's own financial reports, around $174 million was spent on development, making it one of the most expensive games ever produced at the time of writing. Miraculously, the company did manage to turn a healthy profit on this amount, although its share price remains less than half of what it was prior to the game's release and shows no sign of bouncing back anytime soon. Number 2. Star Wars: The Old Republic, $200 million. Despite releasing almost a decade ago, Star Wars: The Old Republic continues to receive updates on a fairly regular basis. Considering how much time and money was spent on its initial development, though, this really shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Reports suggest that the game had a $200 million development budget, making it one of EA's most expensive and most ambitious projects of all time. This ambition has definitely paid off though, with the game now thought to have generated more than $1 billion in revenue since servers first went live back in late 2011. This would make for a healthy return on the game's hefty development budget, and, with tens of thousands of people still playing the MMO, there really is no telling how much more profit the game might generate before its servers are finally shut down. And finally, number 1, also winner of the topic, the Star Citizen, $275 million. Following several hugely successful crowdfunding campaigns, developer Cloud Imperium Games was able to raise more than $300 million for the production of Star Citizen. Since then, even more capital has been raised through private investment, which has in turn led to both the scale and the scope of the project increasing dramatically. While this is undoubtedly good news for backers and the game's future players, though, it has brought with it a new problem. Production of the game first began back in 2011, yet there is still no clear indication as to when a full commercial release will finally arrive. Estimates suggest that more than $275 million has already been spent on development up to this point, an amount that is only going to increase as production continues to drag on. To say that there is a lot riding on the game's final performance would therefore be a bit of an understatement.